Hi and welcome to Manned Up Conversations, where we connect with evolving men to discuss issues around masculinity and manhood, and also provide tools to help us be better for our society.
When I was initially invited to participate in one of their smaller programs, I was quite vocal in terms of how, for example, guys from New York Times, National Geographic think about photography, from The Guardian in London. These are like top establishment, right? And I said representation in images can be a killer. You know, how you, for example, you put an image of a dead white person on front page, totally different how you do it for a non-white, right? There is a element of dehumanization in it, but many people are not even aware of that, the fact that they're doing that, because they are stereotyped in thinking that this is how these people live and this is how they think about their life. They don't cherish life, because they believe that we don't cherish life in many ways. That's how they portray us in images, right? And these are highest top media houses. So engaging them, I think, promoted me to be the chair of jury. And in that, I commanded that people have to think out of their comfort zone.
Man, welcome to another installment of Manned Up Conversations. Quite excited today because I'm sitting with, like I say, sometimes I get to meet these legends, man. And I'll explain why I call Mr. Lekgetho a legend. But before you get into all of that, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. It's the first part of the year is generally hectic. You know, it's because you're closing off the previous year, the finances, the reports, the evaluation. Did we achieve what you wanted to achieve? But at the same time, it becomes exciting because you're anticipating, things to come.
Sure.
Different things, because you learn from your previous year to make things better. Yeah, especially in our world. The art world is exciting always.
I love that.
Yeah.
And, I was here a couple of, probably, was it just over a month ago, something like that. I heard about the space, the Javett Arts Centre, or do you call it Javett-UP? How do you actually...
Well, I mean, there's always challenges with organizations named after people, but yeah, we call it the Javett-UP.
Okay.
That's their brief, but in full is Javett Arts Centre at the University of Pretoria.
Okay, there we go. So I came through, man, and I walked into this beautiful space where you've got all of this gold, this ancient gold, and like everything in there is just so majestic. And I was like, man, I feel like I like traveled back in time in there, But let me not make this about me, but we're here to talk to you, man. And you're the CEO here, and you've had a wonderful journey. So let's get back into that. For a black guy like myself, it's not every day you get to meet someone who gets to rise to your level in terms of art. Although I would love to believe that art is actually a black thing, but we can debate on that. Right?
Yeah.
So how's your journey, man? Let's hear about it. How did you get into this? And what were some of your influences?
Yeah, I mean, I get this question all the time. And it's always difficult to frame it. But I know I have this pictorial mind of how everything evolved.
Sure.
I come from a family of 11. I'm the sixth child from Raskukune, a place called Skuornort, a very, very West European name. There's actually a place called Skuornort in Poland. So Skuornort is one of the first colonial stations in that Limpopo, the east part of Limpopo. So, I mean, I believe that my father was also artistic in one way or another,
sure.
Or his father rather, not him. So the artistic bent started showing, in higher primary, to secondary.
Yes.
By the secondary level, I was already drawing cartoons in our high school magazine in the 1980s. Also having pen pals, in Europe, writing letters, making those drawings. In lower primary in the village, they used to ask me to draw the fish for them. We black people learned about the locust. And,
So you were that guy, we were all coming to Lekgetho, man, please.
Give me a half a cent. Tola half a cent and I'll do those drawings. I think it just became something that I like doing.
Sure.
And also I think I was a little bit introverted in ways, even though I'm from a big family. So I kind of found a little bit of solace in doing this artistic things. But also I think television had a big role in it. Introduction of TV in South Africa, I think it was 1976. We bought our first set in early 80s, around 81.
Okay.
A small thing like this, and the whole village used to come and check it out. My father
would do the whole wine up, sure.
And it attached to a battery. I think we are moving back to that because batteries are becoming a norm in our homes, right? As inverters, but they are batteries. You equate a battery to watch television. And animation, there used to be the Lai. Later we trained them more too. So this animation used to really, really intrigue me. Like these are drawings. Because they're not real people. I want to do this one day.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, man.
Yeah.
That's such a wonderful story. And I always say to people, or the people that I get into conversation with is, if you draw back to your earlier days, that's where you actually find, that's where your gold is, man. And now you mentioned you come from a big family, and it's a wonderful thing. And it's kind of unfortunate that, Black families are now opting for we'll do 2 kids and a dog. Getting rid of all of that.
Yeah.
Hey, man, I want a whole squad of family. And you speak of introversion, man, which I am someone who considers myself an introvert. So as a guy, how did you navigate, just the challenge, because I believe, And if you're the quiet one, it was often like, Lekgetho, man, you're such like an odd one out of the bunch, So how was that experience for you?
Well, I think it's obviously you have one father, one mother, right? And they have to take care of this. Obviously the last born is 1987.
Sure.
Growing up, still a lighty. It was attention that has to be spread across. So if you did not get it, then you need to find your space. But also I was kind of removed for a bit and lived with my grandmother about 100 kilometers from my original village.
Sure.
But I think the most biggest change came when I went to a boarding school in 1986. So I think boarding school shifted my perspective around friendship, but also being away from home. You start realizing that you have to be self-sustainable, so you have to be independent. You have to grow fast. That's where you learn the tricks of the streets.
Yeah.
The street, the tricks of the dark alleys.
Sure.
How to become a man, a young man in among other young men, but also it was a mixed. It was male, female, and other, I guess, boarding school, and just a church school.
Okay.
So there were this kind of cushion, spirituality was from part of our day-to-day existence. But at the same time, there were politics around, soldiers used to come in and ransack the whole place because some of the activists used to hide in our boarding school. So there was never moments of stability, You were always on your toes, right? And imagine you're 13 years old, 12, 13 years old. So I grew fast.
Sure.
I grew fast. Sure. I think I got matured sooner than I should have. I think it cut across all my peers during that time. So transitioning from a village, big family, 1980s into a boarding school, there was a major shift.
Yes.
Let me put it that way.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Okay. And that, there's an article I read, man, where you're actually in, am I right to say, the Vogue Italia? A couple of years ago, I think it was 2021 or 20, somewhere late 2020s, right? Or early 2020s. And I was like, man, this man is on a Vogue magazine. You know how many guys, or black guys for that matter, from Kaskuku get to make it to that magazine, So you obviously traveled, talking about being in boarding school, talking about exposure to different sets of friends and that. How did this exposure to getting to that market now? Because you studied overseas as well, right? To get your MBAs and all of those other levels.
Sure.
How is that market different from the South African market? And also just the exposure of just messing around and getting dirty with the guys over there. How did that kind of build how you seeing the arts right now?
Look, I think, South Africa has always been a powerhouse in terms of culture, and exporting culture. From dance, from music, from about Miriam Makeba days, the greatest exports of African music, not just South African music. South Africa is sophisticated because of the multiplicity, right? There's no single genre of style. If you listen to music from the rest of the continent, from your north, Algeria, Tunis, Egypt, coming down to Sudan, Ethiopia, it's almost, there is a character of that particular one. Even Nigeria, there is a character. But South Africa, you're hit with Mahotela Queens, to Black Coffee, to Mapiano, to Brahu. To the Takamiya. So there are these multiple kind of cultural elements that makes this multicolored South African culture that is quite unique and an inspiration to the world. So I think that I embodied that in terms of how I thought, my worldview.
Yes, sir.
I always felt that there's no single truth, construction of meaning either through poetry or song. It's multiple, it's multi-layered. And I think that equipped me when I began to enter the international space. My first Europe or outside South Africa experience was getting an internship, securing an internship in Rotterdam, in Holland, at Museum Boijmans van Beuningen in around 2004. I was brought in because that museum is one of the top museums in Holland, if not in Europe. They have the largest collection of works on paper. They were for the first time hosting an exhibition, a solo exhibition by an African artist. Artist's name is Yinka Jonibari. He is Nigerian, but it's like British of Nigerian origin. So basically, it's Nigerian living and working in Britain, the UK, to be more specific. My interest was around audience development, because obviously I was the first cohort of post-apartheid graduates in fine art. So I started my fine art in 1994 when just the country was transitioning. I was two black students in my class in the Natal Tech then. So I worked for a museum soon after, and then I got to be interested in how do we shift these establishments that are perceived as colonial in their nature, and they were colonial. Culturally, they were there to position whiteness. Black experience with museums were around things like craft, ethnography, things that are very, very problematic in how they are positioned as a black cultural practice, living out very important works, right? So I was invited there, and I chose to be in the audience development division. It was called the business division. And I was then tasked to create a program to kind of as a prelude to the exhibition, just to bring attention to the museum, because the museum never had large numbers of non-Hollanders or Dutch or white coming into that museum. So, but Holland at the same time has a lot of migrants, from Suriname, from Morocco, you name them, even a little bit of Turkey and the Middle East. So how do they then ensure that when the exhibition opens, the color of skin is diverse, right? So I had to design a program 3 months before my time by myself. I thought I was going to get support, but I was just thrown in like, do it. And I did it,
Man.
And it was a huge success. For the first time, they had drums, they had people performing things that they've never performed in that space for the first time. So I think for me, that's when the international space kind of allowed me to enter it. And my thought process from then on shifted. My goal was to now begin to have our voice and our thinking, our intellect present in decision making of the world within the arts space, especially visual arts, because those decisions are made at those high levels. They define how the world sees meaning. But also perceive Africa. So shifting all these kind of perceptions became my mission. So I became an activist in a way. And that allowed me to enter up until the Vogue that you speak to.
Man, until you made the big time.
Yes.
But did that even feel like a much of a big time? Because you already done like so much throughout the journey, right?
Yeah.
So did like Vogue or like any of these, being on like magazines or even being on this podcast for that matter, do you ever feel like you get to points where you're like, oh man, that was quite an achievement? Or does your work feel like, no man, but like I'm doing so much more stuff on the other end. Yeah. You guys only get to see like the shiny, polished kind of version of it?
I mean, to be honest, it's not that I'm not honest, because we generally say that, to be honest, as if I'm not honest. The reality is that I'm living my life, as much as it's work, but this is integral to my life.
Sure.
I learn. I always tell my teams, wherever I work, or whoever I interact with, learning is the most beautiful thing to humanity. Every single day you learn. And also you learn from engaging.
Sure.
And sometimes you discover yourself. Because sometimes you speak about things automatically. You don't remember them. They just come out. And suddenly it's like, what? That actually happened, And I mean, for example, after the Europe came back for 5 years, I did well. Then I got a fellowship to study anywhere in the world, and I chose to go to a particular place, fully paid for 3 years. That's where I did my master's. And these things comes because of how you engage, how you share your own experiences. I might look quiet when I'm on the street.
Sure.
But when we begin to engage, let's do things. I like doing things, by the way. I want to see things happening. Even if it fails, but we learn from that failure.
Yes,
and that's the most exciting thing, that once you learn from that failure, you become a better person, a better planner. And also confronting, I like confronting very hostile environments.
Yes, sir.
I was I was the first African to be invited to be the chair of jury for the World Press Photo. So World Press Photo is the kind of largest platform for photojournalism and photography on this planet over 60 years. So for the first time, they had a non-European, non-white person to chair it. I was there. But since then, things have changed. They're beginning to diversify it. Just for the fact that when I was initially invited to participate in one of their smaller programs, I was quite vocal in terms of how, for example, guys from New York Times, National Geographic, think about photography, from The Guardian in London. These are like top establishment, right? And I said representation in images can be a killer. How you, for example, you put an image of a dead white person on front page, totally different how you do it for a non-white, right? There is a element of dehumanization in it, but many people are not even aware of that, the fact that they're doing that, because they are stereotyped in thinking that this is how these people live and this is how they think about their life. They don't cherish life, because they believe that we don't cherish life in many ways. That's how they portray us in images, right? And these are highest top media houses. So engaging them, I think, promoted me to be the chair of jury. And in that, I commanded that people have to think out of their comfort zone.
Man, I love that, man. You're touching on something that I always see, and maybe not so much in pictures, but in videos. When you go on social media, you're bound to see someone, hey, bona nyaupe boy. And I look at that, I'm like, but that's a human being.
That's a human being.
That person has a story before he got into all of those drugs. So why don't we highlight that about him? That might actually remind him of like the good days and the good person he actually is.
Depression. Depression is a killer. We find solace in I find solace in drawing.
Sure.
But some people, because there is no sense of survival going beyond, also getting to survival mode can be a problem, because once you're survival mode, you're brought into a space where you're always on the defense. You don't attack.
Yes, sir.
And it's easier for you to fall And drugs can take you from smoking weed, and if you're not lucky, end up in Nyaope. It was Lekgetho, a CEO.
Yes, man.
3 months down the line, I'm in the middle of the street, Nyaope, and that video is like, oh, Bona Autila, John Watlan. But they forget that Lekgetho, who used to be a CEO here.
Man.
So I think for me is that the wellness across the world, is mental wellness the biggest killer.
Sure. The
biggest killer of families, of individuals, of souls. I think also it's a blocker of progress. South Africa, for example, I don't think we are okay. I don't think we are traumatized. We've never dealt with the trauma. We don't deal with the trauma. We've normalized the trauma that we subject to others. Yeah. I mean, the level of violence and violation around that, we're desensitized. We don't feel that we need to respond. I mean, you see videos of something happening in Josie downtown, Small Street. You even laugh about it.
Yeah.
Even if you come go house, come share, because we've accepted that danger is us. But how are we going to progress? We will never find ways of going beyond it if we don't begin to shift our mindset.
Man.
And that can happen in many ways, including things like the podcast, but also art centers as a whole. Music can do that, but we just need to find ways of coming together and dealing with it.
And you touch on so many different things, and talking about the healing that we need as a nation. I look at everything we say about men and fathers are missing in action. I'm like, yes, because these men they went from like survival to like make it. There was no, okay guys, these are the gradual steps to get you to that level of making it. And I often look at the pictures as well, right? So sometimes I'm looking for graphics for maybe a piece of work that I'm putting out, and I struggle to find black men in different expressions, in different expressions. You either see a black man as very successful, like I said, or he's back in the villages, or he's like in some kind of, sorry type of position,
compromised,
depressed kind of thing, compromised, like you say. But the art world, man, is a place that gives us that, that vision,
sure,
that difference in the nuances that men and actually black people go through as a general.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're manned up and you talk to men specifically. So how would you say, man, what's one way that we could do, maybe I could do as well through my social media, someone carrying a phone, how can we look for those stories to kind of enrich the black story and not just only tell like these negative, hey, but the AKA got shot and suddenly here's the video and like, dude, respect the man's family, Yeah. So how can we do that, man? And like change the way we report stuff or share it?
I mean, it's a difficult one because obviously it's to mobilize in this country. You can only mobilize if you're an EFF style, if you attack it in vulgar way.
Sure.
That's the unfortunate thing. Yes, the biggest mobilizers, they use vulgar, they use fear, they create animals. That's how we exist. So people have also been conscientized in looking for that, to be attracted to that type of fear mongering, that if you don't vote for us, Mandela will rise. And Magogo banana Mandela, So it's a construct that is highly problematic and it counters how to do things. I mean, even in religion plays around fear.
Yes,
as much as you can, but you are forced to be in a certain kind of mindset, because if you're not, the devil will catch you. So that fear play needs to stop. And I think, I was just in my group, my ninjas group, there are guys who just share things without understanding that these things are problematic. So I always question, like, when you forward, do you forward because in other group they enjoyed it and you just forward us thinking that we'll enjoy this? Without context. It starts from these intimate spaces, because I think before it used to be go street corners are now on WhatsApp, right? So for me, is we men who need to begin to attack each other in those spaces. There are guys who post very misogynistic things on Facebook. They laugh about it because for them it's normal. And for normal. I normal.
Sure.
It's not normal.
Sure.
I don't look at WhatsApp group. Let's confront it. Let's write about it. Let's conscientize ourselves. But also, I think encourage people to self-reflect.
Yes, man.
And from that individual level, I think you begin to possibly impact somebody positively that they will go to another group and begin to spread that. And I mean, I remember that at some stage there was some of the first men marches was at Ellis Park, which I thought was a beautiful way of thinking about it, where men say, like, guys, we have to stop. Let's mobilize ourselves and let's get into our congregate in one space and talk about these issues at that mass level. But sometimes when we leave, we go back to those problematic spaces with that large support. So I believe let's start in these WhatsApps. Let's begin to spread these messages there. Let's begin to spread the codes from BICO in there, from codes that begin to be progressive in their nature that will help us heal. Healing has to start from the energies closest to you, not the Mandela energy or the Zuma energy or the Tutu energies.
How are you gonna change that? That's so far away from.
It is too far. Start here. Start from your immediate person. And I strongly believe that, and that's the measures. That's what we are adopting here. Sure. We believe in your one-on-one interaction with the art. But also just engagement and dialogue. But also I think once we have that, the communal becomes easier, the gathering becomes easier, and it grows. We create communities of, the beehive, from one little one to multiple. So I think that's one way of thinking around how do we change our world. We live in difficult times, and I think it has to start from the closest person that's next to you.
Oh man, you speaking my language right now. Because one of the key things I always say about man-up conversations is one brother at a time.
Yeah.
I can look for like impact and like, yeah man, I want 1,000 people to watch this and hear it. But like, if one guy listening to this can be like, yo, I don't know, these people touch my heart, man. I'm actually gonna pass it on.
That's what it is.
That's exactly what we need to do.
Yeah, you and I doing this, it's healing, and I feel better.
Yes, sir.
And the more I feel, the better energy. I think it begins to translate to whoever who's sitting by themselves, being part of, becomes a three-way.
Yes, sir.
Because the reality is that as both of us are communicating, we actually extending our energies to that person behind that screen. And that person's energies begin to also derive value, in a way begin to engage with what we're saying, And I think that's how possibly we should think strategically around access to these technologies that are individual. Television is you see 3 or 4 or 5, but the cell phone is you and yourself in your bedroom sleeping, about to go to sleep watching this conversation. Man. And once you go to bed, the dreams become, enhanced in many ways.